There are various ways, various techniques we can do similar things in drawing, but when it comes to creating light effects quickly and easily, there really is no substitute for sketch markers, for using markers to apply ink over broad areas fairly quickly in a range of different values to create the light effects that we want for our scene. I thought this old stone church in Sydney on a sunny day with a lot of shadow being cast on it, but with one wall in the dappled sunlight, was a good subject to try this with. And I'm using a 0.1 millimeter Copic fine liner pen for this. Now, this is a fairly typical way I would draw and progress freehand in ink. So without pencil underdrawing a subject such as this, I start with a part that I think I can do relatively accurately. In this case, it was the door. And then I move out from it in different directions. And if I think that the starting point is accurate enough, then I'll use it as a reference, firstly referencing that part of my photo, but then use that part in my drawing to draw the parts I haven't yet drawn. So now I'm going off and doing these two front windows. Again, a typical technique, order of drawing for me, closest things first. So there is a spray of some sort of shrub that comes in front of the window. And look, it's easy to leave this sort of detail out, but if we always leave it out, we never learn how to include it in. And all of our drawings can end up looking a bit, artificially sterile if all the little this and that's that end up creating a sense of realism are gone. Then they're always going to look more like specimen objects than real life. So it's good to practice when these things turn up in our drawings, because that's how we learn to do them. So even the apex of this porch gable, I'm aligning with the angled corner buttress I've already drawn. Now, I didn't draw that left-hand edge to the porch accurately enough. It was a bit too close to the window, so I pushed it out a bit. And yes, it looks a bit messy here, but it won't look nearly as messy at the end. So I always find it's best to correct what I'm doing as I do it if it's not quite right. Now, this line drawing I will post on my channel community page. So if you'd like to have a go playing with just the sketch marker side of this, then you're free to screenshot my drawing and print it off, and then print it on your drawing paper, and then just start at the sketch marker stage. So you can see me checking angles and aligning. One of the ways I can check that my point for the apex of the roof, the pitch of the roof, is correct, is to see whether the angle from the point down to the corner on the reference is the same as what the angle will be in my actual drawing. And if I'm on location, I can hold my pen up in front of my eye and shut the other eye and do the same thing and just bring it straight down onto the paper to check the angle. Far more accurate than it actually sounds. And here I go with this circular window. It is interesting that I've now done 25 videos of the 10-minute daily drawing exercises. And it's been very interesting to see the effect that this has had on my own drawing. Because while I don't think I've particularly learnt any new skills by doing those quick drawings, I feel like it's given me a certain confidence in pushing out with my line work. I feel like I was far more able, just within my own head, to just start and progress this and to feel a measure of confidence with it. So if you've been doing those daily drawing exercises, I hope you can start to see, if you've been doing them from as long as I have, which is 3.5 weeks now, I hope you're starting to see some improvements. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I have a playlist called real-time 10-minute daily drawing exercises. And the idea is that it's just a 10-minute drawing to do each day for ongoing drawing betterment when you don't really have much time and don't want to use part of it trying to find what to draw. You could watch the video on the train or at lunchtime and then draw it in the evening if you wanted. So because I know I'm going to be using the sketch markers, I'm not spending time doing hatching very much at all, only the tiniest bit in the odd place. And particularly with the tree foliage, again, if you're familiar with when I draw foliage, there is a lot of hatching normally, but there is no need to do that because I'll be using the markers. But I do want to give some marks with the pen now to help corral the ink, so to speak, to help give me a sense of when I get the markers and start to use them, because I will use them fairly briskly once I start, that I can keep them within the borders of where I want them to go. It will just help me to navigate. I'll still be looking at my reference. These aren't marks that I'll use instead of the reference, but combined with the reference, it doubles up my opportunity for accuracy, because once the ink is on the paper, it's going to be on the paper. But I do want to do the ink as quickly as I would do it if I were on location, because this is the sort of drawing where I think both the way I'm doing the line work and the way that I do the sketch marker, it's very suitable for location work. I can't actually make these videos like this on location because I don't have the capacity to record them. But that doesn't mean we can't develop techniques in the studio that are suitable for location. And that's just about it. Time to get the sketch markers and to apply the light. So I'm now using Copic sketch markers. I'm using 7 different values of the neutral grey colour. So that's from N0 to N6. Now I'm starting with N5 and doing what I think will be the darkest values, although I do end up making some of these N6 in the end. But it's easier to make them darker later on than to make them lighter, although I do have an issue with that, which I'll show you when it happens. But for now, I'm nice and confidently doing these darkest areas. Now I did that doorway further back with N4 because even though in some ways it's a similar value, further back values appear lighter in life, and so it creates a sense of depth of distance. So what I do now is I use N4 to do the fronts of this building, the front of the church and the front of the porch. And really, if I could turn back time, I would have chosen N3. I'm not really sure why I picked up the N4, because usually for things such as this, I like to leave a 2-value gap. Now, while you watch the drawing at 4 times speed, real-time drawing speed, you're watching this at 3 times. So this is slightly slower, just to give a better look at what's happening. So I'm using the brush end of the sketch markers because I just prefer the way they work on the paper. Going back to my 4 and just adding a little extra under the eaves. So it's not a darker colour, I'm putting more of the same value on, and they do dry slightly lighter, and that's important to remember too. So I'm back with my N5 to do the shadow on the roof of the porch with a bit of that shadow reflecting branches that just dip into the sunlight, and a little bit more of that darker shade. Really, what we're doing is, once we see the effect of what we've drawn, we're working out what value will now create the value of the light around it best. And at this point, I discovered that I haven't actually drawn in the windows, which are very foreshortened. It's a very steeply angled view, but they do sit between the buttresses in an observable way. So just quickly put those in. So a lot of the shadow is dappled. It's coming through this large tree on the right-hand side. And so we need to be creating dappled light effects with our brush markers. So I find generally drawing them lightly and briskly and trying to get a bit of a directional slant on them is important. If we draw them too slowly, they will all tend to be blobs. They will all tend to have a roundness about them as the ink is absorbed. So we always need to draw them very briskly, as we do actually whenever we come up to an edge in a drawing. Because if we go too slowly, then the ink will bleed past the edge. So having at least done a starting point on the church, I now have the values to apply to the surroundings. And when we have a scene such as this, it's often the building, it's often the architecture that is our focus points. That is our focus point. And that can mean that sometimes we're a bit disinterested or impatient or even resentful of having to do the other things around it, particularly foliage. But the bottom line is, if we want our drawing to work, we have to put as much effort into the peripheral objects as we do into the star of the show. That doesn't necessarily mean we draw it in as much detail or it takes as long, although it might, but it simply means whatever it takes to work in our drawing, we need to have a commitment to doing. So the first drawing, the first part, the line drawing, took me 20 minutes, and this part, the marker part, took me pretty much 20 minutes as well exactly. It was a 40-minute drawing from start to finish, and if I'd sat down on location to draw this in 40 to 50 minutes, I'd have been very pleased with the time frame for it. Certainly adding the tape around the border makes it very handy to have a neat finish in a scene such as this, particularly when we're using the sketch markers fairly freehand rather than within enclosed line spaces. On location, it's not always so obvious at the start where to put the borders, even if we want them. But once we've established with the line work, our main subject, it can be easier to work out then where to put them just at a later stage rather than at the start. Again, the same as with the shadows, you can see I'm moving very briskly because I think that's going to create, in the end, a better dappled effect. I want there to be a freshness with the application of these. But it's important that we preserve the lightest parts that are still in our drawing at this stage, and we visually create a little bit of buffer between some areas just to help us see them more easily. So I'm going back and forth now between mostly 2, 3 and 4, N2, N3, N4. I used a little bit of N5 just for those very first darkest leaves, and then I went to N4. And when I was looking at the reference, I'm trying not to see leaves, I'm trying to see value. Now, sometimes the entire value is just one leaf, but in lots of places, there's a lot of leaves that together have the same degree of darkness in our reference, and so I apply the marker as one broad area for that. But I do want a sense of dappled light coming through. So I'm not doing too much too darkly over too broad an area on the tree. I am going back and forth, briskly and quickly. You can easily end up with 6 of these markers crammed into whatever the non-drawing hand is, if you're not careful. So now I've got these trees on the other side. The values of the uppermost tree are much lighter, and so I want to keep them lighter, and that will also help them to sit further back, and it will help the right hand tree to feel a lot closer, and that's important too. So we're pretty much done. Does it feel like a bright sunny day with a lot of shade and shadow being cast on and around our subject? What do you think? And then it's just the reveal, taking off the tape quickly, a bit too quickly, had a little bit of paper tear there. That's always frustrating, isn't it? And then we have our final drawing. What do you think? Do you think I went a little bit too dark on the front of the church? An N3 perhaps would have been better than an N4. What do you think? Tell me in the comments. And if this was helpful, then please hit the like button. And remember, if you want to, you can start this at the line stage because I've posted the line drawing on my channel community page. So you can screenshot that and get to work with the values. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, it's great to experiment with capturing light by manipulating the dark values that we have in a scene. It's a great skill to develop, and it's a great skill to have on location if we want to capture often a very contrasting light effect quickly. It can be very satisfying and really transform a drawing in a very short space of time. But look, whatever you draw and however you draw it, whether there are light effects to be captured or not, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.